Hello everyone. In this video we'll be looking at conduit cable factors, why they are used and how to calculate them. To correctly calculate your work you will need the on-site guide, and conduit factors can be found in Appendix E on page 145 of the 18th edition. Conduit cable factors are used to determine how many cables you can fit inside a run of conduit without damage to the cable during installation. Trying to force extra cables into a small area risks damage that might not be able to be seen once it is inside the conduit, such as the stripping away of insulation, leaving the bare conductor exposed inside the steel conduit. For that reason, conduit should only be filled 45% with cable, leaving 55% as free air. This will also help to prevent overheating, though this should be taken into account as a cable factor for grouping when doing installation calculations for your selected cables. So, there are two ways to calculate conduit factors, each depending on the type of installation. The first will be for short straight runs of conduit of less than 3 meters, and the second will be for any straight run of conduit over 3 meters, or for any length of conduit with one or more bends. We'll look at short straight conduit runs first, and to calculate these we'll need tables E1 and E2 in the on-site guide. You'll notice that table E1 has two sections, one for solid core cable and the other for stranded core cable. As you can see, the cables at the top have a solid core and the cables at the bottom are made up of multiple strands, which affects their rating slightly. These cables will be selected and their corresponding factors will be calculated before installation begins, so you know what size conduit to install. However, if the conduit is already installed, you can calculate how many cables you'll be able to safely draw through it. This is particularly important where bends are added, as it is the most likely place for damage to occur. In an exam situation, you'll be given a number of cables and it would state whether they are solid core or stranded core, and you'd have to do the calculations from there. So let's see how it's done. For this example, we'll go with a 2.8 meter straight run with a mix of stranded and solid core cables. So we'll have 5 1mm squared solid core cables, 4 2.5mm squared solid core cables, and 3 6mm squared stranded core cables. First, you'll need to find the relevant cable sizes and types from table E1 and highlight those. Now we have those, we can go across to the right hand column and find the cable factor for each one. You'll see that 1 mil squared has a factor of 22, 2.5 has a factor of 39, and 6 mil has a factor of 88. Next we'll use our cable factors and multiply these by the quantity of each cable. So we'll multiply 5 times 22, 4 times 39, and 3 times 88. We add all of these together to find our total, which will give us a cable factor of 530. Now we have our total, we can move on to table E2 to find our conduit size. This table shows that 16mm conduit has a maximum rating of 290, so can't be used. The same goes for 20mm conduit with a factor of 460, which is still below 530. Next will be 25mm, which has a factor of 800. As this is more than 530, then this size conduit is suitable for the installation and would be selected. Next we'll go over a run incorporating bends. We'll keep the same cables but extend it to a 6 meter run with 2 bends. For this we'll now need tables E3 and E4 from the on-site guide. You'll note that in this table there is no difference between the solid and stranded values, so the cable type in that regard can be ignored. The cable factors for each of these will now be 16 for the 1 mil squared, 30 for the 2.5 and 58 for the 6 mil. Again, we'll times these by our quantities of cables to get our total cable factor. With our total cable factor of 374, we can now move to table E4 to get our conduit factor. The first thing to do is find your conduit length in meters from the left hand column. If you recall, this is a 6 meter run, so it's this number across the row horizontally that we'll use to find our conduit factor. From here, you'll need to select the amount of bends you have from the shaded section across the top of the table. Our question stated 2 bends, so we'll work with this section here. Again, it's now a matter of lining up your 6 metre run with a number greater than 374. 25mm conduit has a factor of 333, so we can't use that. So we'll have to increase the size to 32mm to give a conduit factor of 600 to fit all these cables in safely. We'll then line up our conduit factor vertically to find that we now need 32mm conduit to install all these cables. If you had a cable factor greater than 600, you would use the factors at the bottom of the page to find the correct size. So for 38mm conduit, you would multiply 600 by 1.4, giving you a conduit factor of 840. This can be increased again for larger diameter conduit in line with the figures stated. Some points to consider for your revision and your exams is that tables E1 and E2 are straight runs of under 3 metres, often called a short run. That tables E3 and E4 are straight runs of over 3 metres or for any length of conduit with a bend in it. And to always check whether the question states solid or stranded core cables, as they often have different values. Also, all the figures in the tables in Appendix E have already had the 45% rule applied, so no further calculation is required on those. And trunking factors are calculated the same way as conduit factors, but use tables E5 and E6. And we'll go over those in a separate video.